Hello. What I'd like to talk with you about right now um, is the difference between very clear arias with fixed forms that are easily recognized and uh, operatic music where the forms are not so clearly identified and not so clearly conceived and not so clearly um, written by the composers. We've seen this already in La Traviata. I hope you followed me in the last couple of weeks on this. Remember, we talked about a very fixed aria form. In fact, it's a double aria form where a single character will sing a slow aria, then there'll be some sort of interruption, and then that same character whose mood has changed in some way because of the drama um, all of a sudden sings a faster aria. And that form, you remember, was cavatina and cabaletta. The cavatina is the slow aria, which sometimes involves a cadenza where the orchestra drops out and the singer goes up to a high note. That's the slow one, the cavatina. And then there was the cabaletta, which was the faster one. We saw this for Violetta at the end of Act One of Traviata, and then we saw it for Alfredo at the beginning of Act Two. And just to refresh your memory, I hope you can hear this, but this was at the beginning of Act Two. Alfredo sings the slower aria, the cavatina, where he's talking just about how wonderful it is to be in love. My ebullient spirits rise because I'm so in love. And listen to that. And you can go back and listen to that obviously on your own. I hope it comes through on this video. I'm playing the music on the computer. And then Alfredo, remember, Violetta's maid comes in and spills the beans. She gives him the news that Violetta, to pay for their love nest, is selling off her possessions in Paris. So Alfredo, all of a sudden, his mood changes. He's all upset about this, and he's going to rush off to Paris. And so he sings the faster aria, the cabaletta, and that's called O mio rimorso, O my remorse. I'm so remorseful that I didn't realize this was happening. And just to refresh you, if you can hear this, here's how his faster cabaletta aria goes. So his mood has changed. Now that double aria form, again, it's very recognizable. The audience knows when each of those arias is about to happen. However, we contrasted that, and I hope this was clear, with the long scene in Act Two, Scene One of Traviata, in which Alfredo's father, Germont, comes to visit Violetta. And part of the reason I gave you the listening notes to do and asked you to pick out the arias, the duets, as opposed to accompanied recitative, was to demonstrate that here Verdi's trying to do something different. He's trying to write something that's just more continuous, a more continuous musical, dramatic context. You should have read by now my responses to Adzan's listening notes, where he did a good job of, picking out where the arias and duets were. But again, I reminded you that this is not very easy because on purpose, Verdi was trying a little bit to sort of keep it hidden and keep the audience guessing. The aria, let's say the arias in that long scene, or better yet, the aria-like sections. Remember, I used that term arioso, which means aria-like. They sort of sneak up on the audience. Whereas before, and we saw in the cavatina cabaletta form, the orchestra plays an intro. The audience knows what's coming. It's going to be a whole aria, long, with a sort of a standard form. What happens in the long scene between Germont and Violetta is there's no preparation. All of a sudden, without realizing it, Violetta is singing a short aria or an aria-like section. But it doesn't go on and on. It doesn't have a fixed form. It's short. And then before you know it, the music changes and they're back into an accompanied recitative. The drama moves forward, and then all of a sudden, let's say Germont the father then has his aria-like section. Whether you call them short arias or whether you call them arioso, aria-like, doesn't really matter. The point is that Verdi is doing something new here. It's a continuous texture that moves between accompanied recitative and aria-like sections, and almost sort of keeps you guessing because things are changing quickly. And in this way, this sort of continuous music form is much more responsive to the drama. Okay, with all of that review done, what I'd like you to listen to now is just a little snippet from a rock album by the Beatles called Abbey Road. Abbey Road came out in the spring of my freshman year in college. I think it was 1970, and no one could sort of believe how new and different it was. And what we'd come to expect from the Beatles up to that point were rock and roll songs. And like arias, those rock and roll songs had a very fixed, recognizable form. And, you know, first came a little introduction, and then came the A section, then came the B section, then came the A section again, and the ending. And everybody sang along in the car as they listened to their radios. And these songs had standard formulas and did everything a song is supposed to do. And there was nothing sort of unconventional about the form. And this is, of course, what we expected when we bought every new Beatle album, is it would have on each side of the vinyl, it would have maybe 6 of these songs, and they'd be separate entities. Well, Abbey Road had that on one side, but then you flipped it over, and on the B side, the Beatles did something no one was expecting. And what they did was, instead of having songs that went on the normal length, they had short sections that were song-like. They weren't complete songs. They were song-like, and they blended one to the other, and brought you through this sort of journey. And this is exactly parallel and similar to what Verdi did in Traviata. First, he had very clear-cut songs. We could compare that to an older Beatles album where the songs are clear-cut. Only in Verdi they're arias, not songs, in the terminology. But then Verdi, as I've said, in Act Two, tried to create something that was more continuous. The song-like sections were shorter, they didn't complete, and before you knew it, you were moving into something new between Violetta and Germont. Well, that's what the Beatles did on this second section second side of Abbey Road. And I'll play you an example. This example will go through 3 of these. I hope you know this album, by the way. This is the side of the album that begins with an actual song, a full song called Here Comes the Sun, which is fantastic. But then it moves into this continuous texture that links these short song-like sections, but they change. And I'll play you the snippet that begins with, the first one is called You Never Give Me Your Money, and that moves into another one called The Sun King, and that moves into one called Mean Mr. Mustard, and that moves into one called Polythene Pam. You'll hear how none of these 4 songs that have names, they're not real songs. They certainly don't go on long like a normal song. Each one only lasts maybe 2 minutes at the most. And the change from one to the next is continuous. Okay. In fact, I won't play that now. What I'll do is I'll put a link down below this video lecture, so you can open the link and listen with some better sound. Okay. I hope this has been clear. Thank you.